Hey guys, Jennifer Tardy here, your career success coach, and we are back for another Ask Me Anything. And you all showed up so well, and because you all showed up so well for me, I want to make sure that I show up very well for you. And so I'm answering all of the questions that came through, and there were about 30 questions that came through. And so the way that this is going to work is that there will be 6 different videos where I'm answering 5 people. And I'm very intentional about saying 5 people because some people may have asked multiple questions. And so if you want to find your question, if you submitted one, you want to find your question very quickly, it's as simple as looking at the post, because I'll tell you in the post whose questions I'm answering and what questions those are. If there are questions that I've answered in the past, in like last week's Ask Me Anything, or in a video that I've done on YouTube, because I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/career success, where I have over 100 and something videos on there. Please do not be offended if I reference you to one of those other videos, because they can go deeper into explanation. So those are the disclaimers, and let's jump right into it. So the first question comes to us from Naveen. Actually, there are 3 questions from Naveen, and thank you for being so loyal. I know that you submitted a question last week. Keep the questions coming. I appreciate that. All right, so question number 1 is, what is an apt and convincing answer for why should we hire you? So Naveen, I answered that question last week with Sarah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link to that video where I answer that question so that you can see it as well too. Okay? All right. So question number 2, what are the signs of the interview going off track, and how can I overcome and make it on track? The good news is a lot of people have asked the same question in this Ask Me Anything. And so I do want to say that there are signals that certain things are going off track, but you can't use each of these signals in isolation, because it very well could be that something else is going wrong, right? So for instance, that if an interview is going off track, and I've actually seen interviewers cut the interview short, meaning cut the interview day short or cut the actual interview short, because they don't want to waste their own time and they don't want to waste your time. And so that's one signal right there. Another signal is complete disengagement by the interviewer. That's another one. Another one is the interviewer asking you the same question in many different ways because they cannot seem to get the answer from you. So maybe they'll ask you this question, they'll say, well, let me ask it in a different way to kind of gain an answer from you. Or maybe they'll keep removing layers and going deeper into that same question because they really don't get a sense that you have the experience, but you're trying to show that you have the experience. And so they'll go one layer deeper into that same question too. Now, these are just a couple of things that are just off the top of my head, but I do have a video. I have 2 videos that I want to reference you to, and I'll put the link to both of those videos in here for you. But one video that I created on my Career Success YouTube channel are signs that your interview was garbage. And I hate that I had to title it that way, but I have to title my videos in ways that people are searching for those questions. So that's one pretty popular video on the channel. Check that out. The second one is signs that your interview is going exceptionally well. That's probably one of the most popular videos on my channel. So check that video out too. Now, your third question is, there's an instance where I'm answering the question and the interviewer is looking somewhere else in his mobile. I was unable to answer it properly. How should I overcome this situation? So your question is almost twofold. One, you're saying, okay, the interviewer was very disengaged. So remember in the question that you just asked a second ago, signs the interview is going off track, that I also said your interviewer may be disengaged. But it also may not mean that your interview is going off track if you look at it in isolation. Your interviewer may have been looking at their phone because some emergency email came through. Maybe they have a short attention span in general. It could have been a myriad of things. I want you to think about this, not so, are they disengaged and is this interview going off track? Think about it in terms of, If a person isn't engaged during an interview, is that the type of person that I would really want to work with or work for in the future anyway? Right? So I want you to also think about it that way as well too, because interviews are a two-way street where not only is the employer assessing you and your fit in the organization, but you also have an opportunity to assess the employer and in their fit in working with you as well too. So, yep. So it wouldn't make me feel too good if an employer were disengaged while I'm trying to answer a question. The other piece to that is if I'm unable to answer it properly, how should I overcome the situation? So your inability to answer it properly, if you've stated something incorrectly and you realize that, it's okay to say, let me actually back up for a second and correct something, or let me clarify something, and then clarify it. But if you're saying that you are unable to answer it properly because you don't know the answer to it, answer it as best as you can and move forward. If you don't know the answer, then say, I don't know the answer, or say, I don't necessarily have that experience, but here's the experience that I do have. So I may need a little bit of clarification on what you mean, Naveen, when you say I was unable to answer it properly. Tell me in the comments, and I'm happy to provide any sort of clarification that you may need. Okay. Moving on to Harold's question. So thank you for submitting a question to Ask Me Anything, Harold. And the question is, what's a good way to start a phone interview? I always struggle at the beginning. Is it okay to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me? Or is there a more professional thing to say? Great question. So I want you to think of a phone interview no differently than you would think of a greeting when you were talking to anyone, when you were opening any sort of conversation. The way that I think about it is, if someone calls me and we're on a phone interview, I'm saying, hello, how are you? And they're saying, how are you? And I'm really answering the question. I'm doing fine today. One of the things that could help is asking, so how has your day been going so far? And really care about the answer to that question. And sometimes that can get things started off on a good track. But I don't want you, Harold, to put so much pressure on yourself for being able to open up an interview well with the introductory talk or with the small talk. It's really up to that recruiter and that hiring manager to lead and pace that interview. And a part of that is also opening up the call as well too. So it's so let them take the lead on it. But if you feel the need to do a part in the introductory part of the conversation, just ask them how their day is going. You may find that it leads to interesting and stimulating conversation. Okay, so that is the answer to your question. Next question, person number 3 is Maria. Hello, Maria, and happy Thanksgiving to you. You said, the last time I interviewed, I was a lot younger. Is there anything I should be thinking about differently in terms of interviews at the director level? Questions I should prepare for beyond the typical list. And so I love this. Number 1, you already know and acknowledge that it is completely acceptable, and I highly encourage questions to be asked during the interview if you are being interviewed. And so, and I don't want to get off on a tangent here. However, the more questions that you are able to ask during an interview, the more it becomes a two-way dialogue. You're really curious and you care. And showing that you're curious and you care can show engagement during that interview. So I actually have a document that has, I think it's 10 knock your socks off questions that you can ask during an interview. And these questions you can ask at any level. I am not a proponent. I am not a fan of of 2 things. Number 1, of waiting until the very end of the interview to ever ask questions. I think that as a two-way dialogue, questions should be asked throughout the interview, number one. Number two, I am not a fan of asking those typical questions that you're probably referring to, which means like questions about the interviewer, why they're working here, do they like it here, unless it's truly things that you care and desire to know for yourself. But other questions that I'm talking about are questions. Here's a great example of a question that you can ask, especially at the director level. I would ask the interviewer, what are the top three priorities within this department? Or what are the top three challenges that are in this, that you are facing within this department? And so when you ask that question to them, now you're hearing about things that you should actually care about, because it's going to give you great insight on what you're going to walk into. And you're talking now about something that they really care about. At this level, and at any level, a manager they're thinking about the initiatives that are happening within the organization or the department, and they're thinking about their biggest challenges. And being able to say, what are the top three challenges that you're facing right now that someone can come in and take off of your plate immediately? Now you guys are talking about things that it's a mutual benefit. And let me tell you this as well, Maria. If you've ever worked to bring results to one of those initiatives in your past, or if you've ever solved one of those challenges in your past, be absolutely certain to tell the interviewer this. It's not enough to ask the question and to hear the answer, but share with the interviewer, yeah, I've actually solved that problem in the past. And that, Maria, is what will make you way more competitive than the next person that's interviewing for that same position. So I'll put the link to this guide. It is a free guide. I created it, I think, a year ago. And check out all the questions, because they can give you some really good questions to think about as you are participating in your own interviewing process. Okay. Number 4, Alejandro, you asked, is an MBA still worth it or necessary? That's a great question. It's an absolute great question. And I also have my MBA as well. Well, I have my MBA as well, because I haven't checked to see if you have your MBA. But here's my take on this. I am only a proponent of going to get degrees if you believe that it is a part of two things. If you believe that it can help in your career strategy, right? So the types of positions that you know that you'd like to enter into as a part of your career path, that an MBA will set you up to be more competitive against other candidates, and competitive in your knowledge, the knowledge that you bring to the table, number one. Number two, if there is something within that degree that you actually want to learn, invest in something that can make you better. And if it's making you better in your own knowledge bank, and if it's making you better in your own career path competitiveness, then I'm all for it. One of the things that I can tell you personally that I've appreciated about having an MBA is that it gave me a grander sense of how businesses function. And I think that an MBA is a nice complement to other degrees, such as like an engineer, or if you're a data scientist, or or a psychologist. I think that for people who are going into specialties, having an MBA is a great complement, because it's one thing to understand your craft, but it's another thing to also understand how businesses function. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, drop me another question in the comment section, and I'm happy to come back and answer that for you. Okay, last question in the first video by Irene. Irene, thank you for submitting your question. How to excel in job interviews when competing with someone that's more experienced? That is a big question. Okay, so I actually want to reframe how most people are probably thinking about this question. So a person a person may be more experienced in one avenue of this position, but holistically, like, I want you to think about yourself as a whole. You may not have, so let's say, for instance, that one of the basic requirements for this position is that you have 4 years of experience doing this work. Let's say it's an accountant, that you have 4 years of experience doing, I don't know, journal entries or something. And someone else may come in that has 10 years of experience doing journal entries. But when you think of yourself, when you think of the whole version of you, there's a lot more that you're able to bring to the table. And your goal is to make sure that before you leave that interview, that you're able to share the whole version of you. So yes, you may only have fewer years of experience, but maybe you've worked on projects that are more interesting to that employer. Maybe you've led teams before, but this other person hasn't led teams before. Maybe when you were studying and when you got your degree, that you were able, like, you graduated with honors in a certain area. I mean, so there's so many more facets to you. One of the basic things that I want to make sure that anyone that's watching this knows and understands is that when you are looking at a position, there are typically basic qualifications, and then there are preferred qualifications. The closer you are to meeting all of those qualifications, the more competitive you'll be. So pay close attention, and as you're answering questions, make sure that your answers align to what they're looking for. And the grandest thing about a job description is that they'll tell you in there exactly what they're looking for. So Irene, I hope that helps you as well. If it does, let me know. If it doesn't, ask me another question, and I'm happy to come back in to answer that question for you. Okay, so this is video 1 of 6, and we'll get into some more questions in a moment.